famous movie themes of all time, Charles.
There you go, Jason.
Arkansas Clinton and the Temple of Doom.
Again, I mean, from strength to strength. When you send this to me on the phone, I can't often appreciate the intricacies of the artwork. But in this case, I mean, focusing on Arkansas Clinton and his expression with the stubble and the hat and everything, it's just fantastic. It's as if this was actually the real poster.
Well, I try to make these exciting for the viewers, Charles, and also for you. I know you always like the details. Now, this is, again, a sample of a movie that I was a huge fan of as a child. People will remember the bizarre, whatever that guy was who ripped the heart out of the, subject of the sacrifice. So that's Hillary.
That's definitely Hillary. I love it.
And Bill looks sharp.
In her thinner days.
Right. And of course, the Temple of Doom is this really mysterious temple on Epstein's Island, which I guess now is potentially the subject of a battering by Hurricane, what is it? Hurricane?
Dorian.
Dorian, right.
Dorian, not Gray.
Right. Dorian. But it's interesting, Charles, that island has been heavily surveilled by Rusty Shackelford, and his drone sorties seem to indicate that, as recently, I think, as today, there are still people on that island who are doing whatever they're doing. It's interesting to note, of course, we've discussed it before, that the FBI waited until after Epstein was dead to even go there. So it's interesting that, even earlier today, Rusty Shackelford has video of what looks like workmen, maybe even disassembling buildings. It's hard to tell what's going on, but Rusty's been flying over this island every day since Epstein was arrested, something that the FBI might do. This right here, this building looks like it's being disassembled, or maybe it suffered some damage. Has the hurricane hit the area where Epstein Island is?
I'm not sure where that island is in relation to the Bahamas. It may be south of, that is to say, Epstein's thing may be south of where the hurricane appears to be making landfall in the northern portion of the Bahamas. So, and as we're talking about that, I've actually thankfully never been through a hurricane, but I can tell you there are reports now of winds gusting to 225 miles an hour through, and there is not a structure in the Bahamas that will survive a 225 mile an hour wind.
Right.
So I really feel for the people who are there, and people who are concerned about the people who are there. Let's hope that there's a minimum loss of life here. There's certain to be a maximum, would seem, loss of physical property.
Wow.
At least in that portion of the Bahamas.
Well, they don't seem to be losing any physical property on the island. They've got a bunch of guys walking around doing whatever they want. People who watch that Rusty Shackelford video might notice that the FBI took great care in covering up all the windows. So now nobody can see what's going on inside those buildings. It doesn't seem like a properly operated investigation to me, but perhaps, I don't know.
Again, I draw a contrast between Michael Cohen's treatment, Roger Stone's treatment, and Paul Manafort's treatment with Epstein's treatment. It's as if, the more perverted and depraved and criminal you are, the more likely it is that the FBI is going to give you a pass. It's just, I don't understand Epstein. First of all, I don't understand the decision of Epstein to return from France in a private jet to that airport. There are many reports in the past that he always seemed to know when something was up.
People would call him.
Yeah, he had insiders. And so to me, it's more likely that Epstein might have been rounded up as part of some long simmering negotiation. That may or may not have gone wrong. We don't really know conclusively what actually happened in a belt and suspenders way to Epstein. We have so many uncertainties arising even before he was rounded up.
Yeah.
And now, as you rightly point out, afterwards, I don't understand why the FBI didn't swoop in. If they're going to swoop into Cohen's apartments and his hotel rooms and his all these other people, and remembering that Cohen was Trump's lawyer, so in a break attorney-client privilege, they just go after him at 5 a.m. I don't understand this contrast.
Reminiscent to me, Charles, of the treatment that a certain Pakistani mystery man received, because it seemed like, when all was said and done, the arrest at Dulles Airport seemed to just provoke a trial that basically let the guy off. He was charged, as people might recall, with just bank fraud, and given this bizarre plea deal to basically absolve him of any responsibility for any crimes he might have done in the 38 years he was alive prior to July 3rd, 2000, was it 18?
I forget, but I think, a little bit off course speaking about Imran Awan, but people need to remember that there are breaking developments in India and Pakistan now. We have gone through a period where initially our scale was tipped in favor of Pakistan over India. Then we began to switch that under Clinton. We got more cozy with India. And these are Hatfield-McCoy type feuds. These are not minor little spats that are going to get solved by some roving ambassador of goodwill. I mean, these are centuries-old conflicts, decades and centuries-old conflicts if you go really deeply into them. And so, just as we ask questions in the Clinton Foundation, who authorized Hillary Clinton to have her toilet bowl server system? When she was Secretary of State, in theory, a time when our nation's most important secrets went through her toilet bowl server system and these unsecured devices. Just as we should ask about that, we might also ask, who authorized so many Democratic members of Congress to use Pakistani people to handle the information and the secrets that very senior people, including Debbie Wasserman Schultz and others, were seeing on their email? Who authorized Imran Awan to have this long-standing set of business arrangements, and who vetted and monitored that, if anybody?
I just bring him up to ask the question of, is there someone or multiple someones who have access to the FBI who are sort of staging these arrests to make a big public show and then get the perp sort of out the back door in the way that possibly Mr. Epstein was? But you remind me, Charles, this conversation about the toilet bowl server, it's really bizarre to me that when you Google Charles Ortel, Mrs. Bill, you would expect the first thing to come up to be that YouTube video, but it's not. They've got all this other Google stuff here before you get to Mrs. Bill. It's even somebody else's playlist that comes up before the original video. So I think people are pretty well aware that YouTube and Google are manipulating results. And today is September 1st. So it's the perfect time for people who support Crowdsource the Truth and like to watch us every week to become sponsors by going to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. It's extremely important because what happens is at the end of every month, there's like a huge drop off, like significant, of like credit cards that have been canceled or people who have decided they don't want to subscribe anymore. So today is a great day for people to join. We got a ton of exclusive content that you can access when you go to those two websites, and it's a great way to make sure that Google is not controlling what it is that you get to see, but people can choose to watch whatever they choose.
Good thinking. Well, again, congratulations on another piece of fantastic artwork added to the long slew of those that are up there on the playlist. But this is really fantastic.
Thank you very much, Charles. So with that, I think we might want to get right into your slides. I know you've prepared quite a few for today. Actually, you've done a really interesting study for today that's a bit of a departure from our usual normal stuff. Well, why don't I just let you explain?
Sure. So to begin with, what we're going to be talking about is the likely choice that the deep state is going to have to make here between protecting the Clintons and protecting the Obamas, because you can't protect both of them. It's my suspicion that the Obamas really were hoodwinked by the Clintons, that they had no idea when, at the very beginning, they had no idea how bad the Clinton Foundation was and how bad the long-standing pattern and practice of Clinton skullduggery was. As a guess, I don't think they didn't have an intact team. They'd never run anything as big as the presidency, and Bill, in contrast, had been president for two terms. And so I don't think it was a fair fight, and I think at the very beginning he realized, oh my God, yes, I won, but I've cut a dirty deal here with the Clintons. She's going to be Secretary of State. I've got Eric Holder in as Attorney General. Who knows what other spies are lurking in there that are going to report back to the Clintons. I better just play along. Was Holder pro-Clinton? He was unclear. He served in the Clinton. He served in the Clinton presidency, and he wasn't Attorney General, but he was a high-level official in the Justice Department. And he claims he was the one who, in theory, had purview of the Mark Rich pardon and the pardon process. He claims that he was hoodwinked after the fact, and he has affected, at times, distaste for the Clintons. But I see him as a crucial person who owes his political standing, in fact, first to the Clintons and then later to Obama. But I really do think we're in a place here, not really just because of the work we're doing, but because of the work that lots of people are doing, far more powerful people are doing around the world. This is an odious scandal. This is not simply as bad as Fast and Furious was. This is way worse than some of the many scandals that have been out there in the public domain. This is, you're talking about Google search results. This is your vote doesn't matter. The whole election process doesn't matter. We care about global warming. We have all these nimrods flying around the world in private planes for debates that nobody's watching. They're, horrible, far worse than reality TV. We go through this for 2 years. And the moral of the 2015-16 election is it nearly didn't matter, because it's my view it'll come out more and more that many people enthralled to the Clintons and the Obamas decided not simply that Hillary was going to win, not simply that they were going to rig the Democratic primaries. They wanted Trump to be the opponent, in my opinion. They felt that Trump would be easier to defeat, and they feared, I think, some of the more traditional candidates. So when the real truth comes out here, when we get Strzok and Page and others out of the FBI and the Justice Department and the IRS, and we root in and find the real records, we're going to see that this is a conspiracy that dates back prior to July of 2008, well prior to that. This was a scheme to, in the first instance, when Al Gore lost, the Clintons decided that, in my view, that national elections didn't matter anymore. Let's pull a switch. Let's sign up for globalism. Let's diminish the role of the U.S. president and all these different leaders around the world, and let's make sure we're in charge of this unregulated globalist mess. So they were pulling strings behind George W. Bush, which wouldn't have been hard to do, and he wouldn't have noticed. They were preparing for Hillary Clinton to assume her inevitable role while they were, as president of the U.S., while they were also grooming people around the world to sit in positions of power, but of allegiance to themselves and to their backers. And so now we're in a place where Donald Trump so far has survived, so far has withstood Mueller and the various assaults, seems to be gaining in strength, and most importantly, forget what I say and you say and pundits say, the American public is listening to these idiots, fake Yapper at CNN and the MSNBC tribe and CNN, all these other people, consistently get every major call wrong. They just take a tremendous amount of airtime and print, spewing this garbage out. And people in America, not everyone's a genius, but most people are smart enough to recognize truth from falsehood. And they look at the period 1988 to the present, and they don't sense that they're better off. If they're working, they're constantly working, they're worrying about their jobs 24/7, 365. They're constantly facing threats from whether it's trying to keep up with technology, to find technology replacing their job. They're worried about their investments, they're worried about their future, and then they see Barack Obama flying around in private jets, which he certainly couldn't afford prior to being president, and buying yet another mansion by the sea,
right.
$14.5 million in Martha's Vineyard. At the same time, he's bouncing around like the Energizer Bunny, arguing that we ought to worry about climate change. I mean, you're so worried about damn climate change, why'd you buy a beachfront mansion? That thing's gone.
What's bad about the climate from a beachfront mansion?
The point is, if AOC is right, in 11 and a half years, we're going to have the seas rising. Obviously, they're going to go right on top of his Martha's Vineyard estate. So why did he just buy it? I mean, it just doesn't make any... The fact that he's even has enough money, never having really worked in the private sector, he's just being given gifts. You want a $60 million book deal? Take it. You want a Netflix deal? Why don't you take that? I mean, it's beyond disgusting in both parties. Started with Reagan. Went to, the Clintons took it to a fare thee well. George W. took his piece. Laura Bush
What did Reagan do?
Reagan was, I think, one of the best presidents in recent history, but after he left, a couple things happened. The first is a bunch of his friends said, hey, you can't afford a mansion in Bel Air, so we just buy it and give it to you. And I don't think you should do that. And then Marvin Davis said, well, you can't really afford the rent at my office building, so I'll give you a top floor of my office building. You could just hang out and be ex-president here. And then the Japanese said, well, why don't you come and give some speeches over in Japan when Japan was still hot? We'll give you several $1 million to give speeches. I mean, that's just a very bad precedent, because the people who are fraudsters and criminals, even back then, don't look at $1 million or $2 million as a lot of money. They look at this. I was hanging around with, I won't say which country, but with some powerful people in a Middle Eastern country. And they were joking about it was much cheaper to buy presidents and officials around the world than it was to finance their racehorses. Those are a lot more. You got to have a farm, you got to have grooms, you got insurance, you got to have a mansion in London, you got to have a farm in Kentucky, and you got to all this kind of stuff. And they were literally laughing about it.
Just hand them $1 million.
You got a president, Wow. I mean, it's this particular guy was telling. I won't reveal who it was. But we were talking a business idea for him. This is maybe 20 years ago. My colleague and I were saying this. You should do this. You should do that. And he goes, "Why should I work? I've got a father. He's the king of the country. I have a credit line, and I just spend money. And at the end of the year, my father pays off my credit line. Whoa! So I, like an idiot, I said, well, how much did your father have to pay last year? He said, 150 million pounds a year. Wow. He's got a point. If you've got that arrangement, why would you work? And that's sort of Obama's approaching it now. I mean, I defy a book agent to. I don't want a $60 million book deal, but I defy a book agent to explain to me, and an accountant and a tax person, how any author of a nonfiction book about the Obama presidency can justify being paid $60 million, even if it's a two for Michelle book deal included. I defy you to explain the logic of that, how that works mathematically for the publishing house. I see how it works for the Obamas and for the agent who gets his or her pound of flesh, but I don't see how the publishing house makes any legitimate money off that. It's no different than me saying, I'm not. It's not a bribe. I just bought Bill Clinton's used underwear for $25 million. I mean, it's just there has to be, at a certain point, there has to be really regulation or an oversight and transparency into these crooked deals or into these deals that politicians who can flip levers of power, either to go after you or to call the dogs off. Any business arrangements that happen involving that politician and that person's family, wide family, should be subjected to great scrutiny. Yeah. And that you should have to say, well, look, for the last, forget other presidential books because they're all crooked. Let's just take non-fiction book deals. Let's take the last 25 of them, and what were the most highly compensated authors, and how does that compare to $60 million for two Obama books? And if the comparables they have to be books written by the supposed author. You can't be taking Bill Ayers and saying, okay, I'll give you another $25,000 so I can get $60 million. You're a communist. You don't care about money. I got mansions I got to pay for. I mean,
you know, Charles, Vox is telling us that it was apparently a joint deal, so perhaps it involved someone at the book company smoking a massive joint before they made the deal. That might explain it. But, you know, the other thing people were reminding us of is that WikiLeaks had actually revealed that they wanted Trump. So they said it flat out that they wanted Trump to be this Pied Piper candidate.
Right. I mean, but what I'm saying, when I say it will be revealed, I'm well aware that WikiLeaks had said that, but I think we're going to find compelling evidence. And we have this idea, at the very beginning, it was all, you know, the mainstream pundits and everybody, Carl, what's his name, Woodward and Bernstein, Carl Bernstein, Bob Woodward, oh, this is nothing like Watergate. Watergate was far more serious, you know. James Comey, you know, I've got a higher loyalty. John Brennan has got our best interests at heart. James Clapper, you know, all these guys are acting like it's impossible that any of this could have happened. And the reality is, I wonder what the hell these people were actually doing, because they're spending so much time. Peter Strzok and Lisa Page are, you know, Strzok is having multiple affairs, texting people, emailing people.
He was having sex with people at CNN that came out in True Pundit. Didn't hear anything about that.
Right.
FBI is screwing CNN. We got to know about that.
Yeah, but how did he have time? I mean, he was our nation's top counterintelligence agent. Does that explain why? You know, when the Russians came calling and said, "Hey, you know, you got a problem with the Tsarnaev brothers," you know, Strzok probably said, "Too busy managing my mistresses. Right. You know, I got to keep the wife happy. Maybe I abandoned that a while ago, but I got multiple mistresses here. Can't check the Tsarnaev brothers." I mean, it really is beginning to paint a picture here that, you know, we worry for all these pious morons who come on to CNN and MSNBC and talk about the integrity of the elections in 2016. What integrity? I mean, the president and cabinet members and the Hillary Clinton campaign doing their level best to rig the primaries and the election, and now you're going to, after you couldn't even manage to win an election you thought you rigged, now you're going to say that we ought to care about the Russians. No, I think we ought to care about the people who've infiltrated this country, or who've risen to positions of prominence in this country from 1988 to the present, who've been articulating this unregulated globalism as a way forward, and have been systematically destroying the fabric of portions of our government that protected us from these idiots. I mean, this is the last thing I want to listen to now is John Kerry talking to me about anything that he did in his entire life. You know, his entire life has been a waste of carbon, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, well, AOC could, you know, take him out and he'll,
right.
You know.
Right, and now he's getting to that age, I don't know, it's not in the slides, but there's this guy, and I mean, what parent names a child Ezekiel? But anyway, Ezekiel Emanuel is nearing the age of 75, so he's written an op-ed. This is a doctor. He's written an op-ed saying that he wants to die when he turns 75. No one should be older than 75.
What?
I'm telling you, that's when you name a kid Ezekiel, you know, his whole...
How old is he now?
He's like 74. It's like saying people over the age of 75 shouldn't be allowed to live.
Is Kevorkian still around? We could put those two together.
I don't know. But it's just... Anyway.
Here's a patient for Dr. Kevorkian.
But when we think about really what's going on again, 2016, 15, 16, I think that what actually made the election cycle very interesting is that when I talked, and you were a Bernie supporter, when I talked to people who were Bernie supporters, I was more on left-wing radio than anything else.
Who are you calling a moron?
No. And more and more of the people that I spoke to, when we put aside certain core economic ideas that they should have my shit and that, you know, taxes ought to be stratospherically high, we put that aside and you start talking about issues of national security, expensive wars, bloated government, failures of our schools, failures of healthcare. There's a lot of commonality of interest across the political spectrum. If you take the parties out of it, you say, forget the Democratic Party, forget the Republican Party, just sit around a table and talk about what's the number one issue for you, what's the number two, and let's see if there's any common ground that can be made. And I think what we actually saw, the pundits wouldn't want you to believe this, but we actually saw in 2015-16 pitchforks coming up for the crooked people, the kleptocrats around multinational businesses, multilateral government organizations, and our own bloated federal and state governments are all people across the board, unless they've got no-show jobs from the government or no-bid contracts from the government. People across the political spectrum want to see that swamp drained. They really do.
Yeah. Well, the pitchfork mob is definitely sharpening the points of the forks. We're running out of time. A lot of people were disappointed by the IG report and the lack of prosecution of James Comey, but I know you've got a lot of material prepared for us, so...
Why don't we jump in to the next page? So the next page is just our standard disclaimer for people who are new to the scene. We really are doing something, have been doing something very different than the mainstream media, and I'll be able to take people through in appropriate detail some of the metrics that show how our approach is actually, it seems to be working. Instead of just doing 20-second sound bites where we speak to you on the third grade level about complex topics and assume that really what you want to do is go to the grill and grill up a steak and drink another beer, what we're doing here is taking you through the largest set of unprosecuted frauds ever attempted in history, the many layers and contours and elements of these frauds, and giving you a chance to see the frauds with your own eyes, see the evidence with your own eyes, think about it, and actually get engaged in the process. This isn't about just giving you a document and then you pretend that you read it and you tell your friends, I read it. What did you think of Charles's document? This is about, you spend the time, thank you for watching, you go follow the links, you see that what we're talking about is correct. We've now laid out a body of evidence here. This is our 174th show, but we've laid out a body of evidence that is monumentally large, tough actually to even describe. I couldn't even guess how many pages and megabytes or whatever the whole passel of everything that we've done is, counting the links. But it's enough information that even Comey loyalists in the FBI, even those people should by now realize that they have a massive problem on their hands. They have to either come out and say, Ortel, Goodman, you're absolutely wrong. Take this shit down. Stop talking about it. We'll let you do one last video where you're sitting there and you can't see the machine gun pointed at our head, and we'll be contritely saying, yes, I love Bill Clinton. I love Hillary Clinton. Chelsea's wonderful. She cares about diarrhea. We were wrong.
They're going to have to get in line for the people who want me to do all those things.
Right. But we've put all this evidence out there, and when you look in the FBI vault files, and there are many of them, and thank you to the good people at the FBI who put them out there, what they seem to show is that there must have a lot of people in the FBI. Maybe they're not watching podcasts yet, but there are a lot of people in the FBI who appear to care a great deal about what they see in the press.
Yeah.
And my criticisms of the Clinton Foundation have been amplified by the process of working with you, Jason, but began before I knew you. And so there's a lot in the press, even the mainstream press, about my concerns, about reactions to my concerns, and yet there are no indictments. The financial statements have not been pulled for this fraud, and they need to be pulled. The state's attorney general aren't doing anything about it. The international equivalents of our Justice Department, the IRS, they haven't yet done anything. And the key word is yet.
Yeah. Well, I'm becoming increasingly concerned, Charles, and even today in your title, you're talking about the Clintons and the Obamas. It takes me back to the funeral of Poppy H.W. Bush, where these strange notes were handed out, and Hillary's kind of got like a sour face on. Nobody really knows what was in those notes, but when we think about William Barr's connection to the pardons of Iran-Contra, his employment with the CIA, his father's employment with the OSS, and then Dalton. I was listening to Whitney Webb this morning. She draws a lot of really interesting connections to Iran-Contra, Agnon Khashoggi, some of these things with Epstein and Barr, and we see that there's no investigation going on. I think at this point it's fair to say the FBI is not conducting a thorough investigation into these Epstein properties, and it seems like we are watching in real time another one of these whitewash type investigations. And what if some deal was made with Trump where it was the crossroads, where we're either going to string you up and you're going to spend the rest of your life in jail for impeachment for all this stuff, or here's the deal, let the Bushes go?
I mean, I know it's talking my own book here, but I have a feeling this is going full speed ahead because, as I said before, as I said, probably in our 25th broadcast, not let alone our now 174th, if the powers that be wanted us to stop doing this, we would have heard about that a long time ago.
But would they?
And they would have also attempted to repudiate the analysis. They have never been able to do. They never even tried, right?
Well, not in any direct fashion, but they're trying to shut down this channel and do a lot of things to.
But 170. This is our 174th video, and 173 are already out there, and there's thousands of pages now of information and articles written, and other people doing work about it. And so, what I would like to do, Jason, this is the playlist that you put together. It's fantastic. It's got 24,000 views, just the playlist. And what I did prior to its being updated, so my work is a little bit off by one. I only had 173.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Oh no. Well, yeah.
Don't worry about it, because I'll keep updating it. What happens is, and the virtue of doing it this way is, it appears we've now seen over many months, years actually, that what happens is when a new viewer cottons on to this show, they watch a portion and they might watch the whole thing and then say, well, what else can I watch?
Right.
And so what I did over the last several days is I said, with regard to the first 173 videos, how should we think about those videos? And if we go to the next page.
We should think about them as masterpieces.
Well, I mean, this is really something else. I mean, a gigantic thank you to the many people who have been watching this now for over 2 years. It takes 9 pages in 12-point Times New Roman font to list out all of the videos, right?
Wow.
So I didn't want to give you 9 pages, but I summarize it here. The first 19 episodes that we did were different. A lot of them were playful. Many were 1 minute or whatever. Comedy bits. So they're not as representative as the balance of our stuff is. But with those first 19, we got an average of 11,511 views per video. These were just from a standing start. And they average only 22 minutes length. And that's counting in there. There's several very lengthy ones that I will probably put in a different page or move back. The Jerry Corsi interview, for example, is our highest most highly viewed video. And for some reason that used to come at the very
That was just a mistake that I made in the playlist.
It's okay, I'm just saying, so I'm going to rejigger it or whatever. But one of the things that I noticed here is all in, we have 2.7 million views.
Wow.
And this does not include, Jason, you set up Crowdsource the Truth 2 when we had some of these issues with strikes and stuff.
Right.
This does not take, for the later period, the main channel and Crowdsource the Truth 2 and try to aggregate the viewership. So there's additional YouTube-related views that are not counted in this. And then we've done no work on trying to guesstimate the Facebook viewership and the Periscope viewership and the other viewership. So this is very much a conservative estimate. So in slightly more than 2 years, 2.7 million views. These videos are just completely in the opposite direction from what anybody who gives lectures about how to do a podcast says is the right thing to do.
Right.
So, right. The first thing they do is find a cat, get some bells, put some stupid music on it, and then maybe get some attractive girl or whatever to make some inane comments, and you'll get 1 million views. I mean, this is the opposite.
Exactly.
Let's just say more mature individuals, won't comment about our age, or they were not that mature, but older anyway, people talking for an average of almost 2 hours, more than 2 hours in the bulk of the videos.
Yeah.
And we're getting this type of viewership. And interestingly, one thing that I'm not sure I understand quite yet is how we could go and have a higher percentage of likes on a lower average number of views over time. Doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it seems to me that if your viewership's going to go up and up markedly, as we'll show you in certain cases, I would have thought that if you're on that kind of a trend where your viewership is rising, you should also be experiencing a higher percentage of likes. It makes sense to me.
It should be about kind of proportional, right?
Right, and so I'd love to see, I don't know that there probably are not many people who have done this many videos this way, this long. So I don't know if there are comparables for, what is the average viewership per almost 2-hour video on a nonfiction topic involving numbers, law, fraud, politics. So, I mean, I don't know that there are many comparables, but I would guess that there are not many that have these same metrics. I could be wrong, but I would guess there are not many. And I would also guess that the number of views, the likes, is good to see an increasing. It's on one hand, it's good to see a rising percentage of likes as a percentage of all views, but it also suggests to me that maybe if you look at the actual number, in the very beginning, the test, it was 4.04% of all views were likes. And now over the whole period, we radically shifted from short videos to long videos, it's 3.94, which suggests the number hasn't really moved all that much. In reality, it started on the shorter videos at 4.04, it then dropped, and more or less steadily rose. It's risen a lot in the last 15 videos, up to 5.85% of all views are likes. Query, does this mean what they're doing is not counting views?
How do you arrive at that? Because that's what I was going to ask you, Charles, is does this calculation take into account any of the manipulation? Because there's two factors of potential manipulation. We've heard now from the Google whistleblower, Zach Voorhees, that Google is straight out putting certain things on blacklists if they've got keywords and whatnot. We know that YouTube has the ability to do voice recognition to the video because it uses that to automatically put closed captions on there. So they could pull anything out that's said, not necessarily keywords that I enter, but anything that you or I say, they could block the distribution of video based on that. We also remember that in May of 2018, when I was in New Zealand, we had another YouTuber who made a video saying that someone had maliciously purchased downvotes for the Pinko Panthers video with Fabienne Chalandon. I don't know if they did that to target that video or because they were targeting Crowdsource the Truth at that particular time, but I don't know if there's any way for us to calculate those kind of manipulations.
I don't know about calculate, but we can certainly discuss it, which we'll do in the next 2 slides. So what I did here is I said, our average again is around 16,000 views. So I said, let's do 50% higher than that and up, and let's see how many we have. So by the 12th of November 2017, the Catch Me If You Can video got 54,000 views, and we were on a rocket ship up in the very beginning, in the September, October, November timeframe. But look how low the percentage of likes was, 1.55%. That just strikes me as odd. Why would you go like this in views and have just such a low percentage of likes? Something's off here. I don't know why. And then almost immediately thereafter, and several weeks, months after that, early in 2018, that's when the hits started coming.
Right.
But in the very
strikes, you mean?
Strikes, and and the viewership started to crimp and whatever. It was as if we were building ahead of steam, and people at YouTube and the Clintons and elsewhere said, "Wait a minute, we can't let these guys really take off before the 2018 election. That's not going to be good. So why don't you put the governor on the speed of this thing and then slow these guys down?"
Not Schwarzenegger, but the View governor.
Yeah, exactly, the View governor. But these just, in terms, if I were sitting there and saying, all right, I'm the Attorney General of Italy, and I've got now this new government coming together, and I understand the Clinton Foundation's a fraud, and we've given them money, and I'd like my money back, I would start to try to understand what was going on here, but I'd get a bunch of interns to watch these shows first, the ones that other people have already said are the most interesting by their viewership, and just go in chronological order. And it happens that a number of these are, I think, do tell the story very well. What we tried to do, of course, this is such a large mess. What we try to do is pick on a piece of the scandal and drill down on a piece each week or each episode. So, and I, of course, am working on a book that will put it all together for people in one printed form. But as we seek to understand, as we're vacuuming out from the public domain and through other ways, as much information as we can on this scandal that nobody wants us to actually know all about, we just felt it was a good idea to take a cut one way, 1 week, another way, another week, et cetera, et cetera. And these are the different episodes that have gotten so far the most viewership. But over time, what happens, Jason, is that if we go back and look at this in 6 months, I hope we'll see that there are ever more people going back and looking at these older ones as well as the most recent ones. So I loved, I'll enjoy all of them, but I think You've Got Jail on January 7th was really a great poster and a great show. And really all of these tell, you mentioned Fabien, we had him on to talk about the French role on February 4th. We were very pleased to have John Solomon on now. It seems like it was yesterday, but it was actually a year and a half ago.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing this reminds me of, Charles, is that I've been getting emails from people who are alerting me that they've been unsubscribed. And the thing is, we sort of look at this like, oh, YouTube is doing something malicious. YouTube owns YouTube. They could decide that the new thing is they're going to automatically unsubscribe people who aren't watching a certain amount per week of a particular channel because they considered it a dead subscription. And maybe there's even a valid reason to do that. Maybe it takes some computing power to have a database of who's subscribed to who. So it's like people are suing YouTube for all kinds of things. Sometimes it's justified, but a lot of times there's a lot of complicated technology going on there, and convincing a judge that you've got something on YouTube, particularly with that CDA 230, could be a challenge.
Well, yeah, and that, I mean, one of the things that does animate my life, my work, is that I believe that rules are required to help regulate human behavior. I don't like to see quite as many rules as, let's say, the Clintons and the Obamas would like to put on our backs, but you do need to have rules. And in Google, the very premise of Google originally was that they were going to organize all the information on the planet in a neutral way, not shifting one way or another. And they weren't supposed to be doing what it appears they're now doing.
Right.
If what they're doing is they're actually letting their political preferences stifle debate and exposure of the most complex and interesting issues of our time, they don't deserve to be in business in the format that they're in business. So I would certainly hope that with regard to our work in particular, where we're taking, yes, I'm anti-Clinton because I'm anti-fraud. I'm anti-Obama because I'm anti-fraud. It's kind of tough for me to see why you would justifiably suppress this work, particularly if you start thinking about it. Eventually, Sergey Brin and the other guy are going to start giving away money. And they're going to want to make sure that their own foundations, which I'm sure they're going to create, are run lawfully, and then they're not being defrauded. As a guess, and maybe they won't, maybe they're just nihilists, and they're like, we die, and that's the end of it. But, so I would hope.
They could remake Big Lebowski if they're nihilists. You talk about animating your life, Charles, it just begs another plug of the Mrs. Bill. I've animated your life to some extent.
I'm all in for more of that. I love those.
Yeah, we can definitely explore it. It took a lot of time.
So on the next page, though, there's another, we've got all of them together, the shows that have the most likes. And unfortunately, you're going to have to ignore, means playlist number. It's off by 1. You have to add 1 to it. And time, I'll have to adjust it. But if you follow on the title and the date, you'll be able to find all these things. And you see, all in, the grand total is, we've got 2,960 minutes worth of stuff. I mean, that's almost 40 hours.
Wow. We should have just
over
sat here
50
and done it all consecutively.
Over 50 hours. I mean, yeah,
that would be like the Ortellathon.
That's a lot. 696,000 views. But interestingly, the percentage of upvotes is less than for the thing taken as a whole. It's 2.88% as opposed to almost 4%. So that's just something odd here. I wonder whether I'm missing something, or there's some aspect of a like vote that I don't get yet. But I don't understand why our most watched videos would have lower than the average percentage of upvotes or likes.
Well,
so maybe some genius can explain that to us.
Quick look at one of those. Like, let's look at Mission Trump Possible. That was the one that CBS has dinged for using a, totally modified to. It took a lot of work to modify this. I better not show it here, or they'll ding this video as well. But you remember, this video opened with you, Charles, sort of in an episode of Mission Impossible. We better not show it because that's got us dinged. But
do fraud spotting. Just pick one that hasn't been, or Badfellows or something.
Fraud spotting.
It's the last one.
Sure. Let me just bring that up real quick. Fraud spotting. It's an interesting exercise. The other thing that complicated is, well, it's only 25 thumbs down and 948 thumbs up.
Yeah, I guess that's closer to the average, actually. That's not a good one. So
it's something worth studying, perhaps not in real time on the show, but definitely intriguing. I think that the factor is, if someone is a malicious social engineer and they see the video getting a lot of views, they can use fake accounts to give it thumbs down. There's a lot of shortcomings with the way that YouTube operates if their intention is to be an open and fair system. Like, we should know who's giving a thumbs down, just for the reason of, if every week it's the same person giving a thumbs down before the video even starts, I should be able to block that person and prevent them from watching the videos. There's another weird thing about YouTube, which is you block people and they're still able to comment and watch videos and say all kinds of terrible things. So it doesn't make a lot of sense at all, Charles.
Yeah, actually, on that, of course, we're not very far away from one of Google's headquarters.
Right.
And there are a lot of Googlers, or whatever, all over the place. And in fact, I've got many pet peeves, but one of them is Google's map thing for your cell phone, which causes, in this touristy district where we are, many people, of course what they do is they stand exactly in the wrong place, in an intersection of two streets, right there, blocking both traffic.
At the top of an escalator.
Looking at their Android or whatever it is, iPhone. And then when they make a decision with no warning, they just whoop, like that, into you this way. But anyway, they were doing this and pissing me off no end as I was walking up here, when all of a sudden I see, on Christopher Street and 7th Avenue, I think I saw a tour guide with a sign that said "Social Justice Tour Guide." So now we have these social justice warrior people going around the village, explaining to fellow social justice warriors why the village is an interesting place for social justice warriors. And this place, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
Like, it's getting to me. Anyway, with no further ado, we'll get into the standard quick presentation. We're taking pity on people during this Labor Day weekend. We're making this a little bit more lighthearted than most of our shows. But your friend, Representative Gohmert, has a great piece in the Daily Caller that is basically saying, "No, not so fast." Comey wasn't completely exonerated. And by the way, nobody gets exonerated.
Right. What is going on here?
This is just X in the upper right there.
You just can't look at anything without getting a million ads.
Yeah.
Now what?
And so the point here is, it used to be that in our Justice Department and the FBI, the standard was not, did you comply with the regulations narrowly or the law narrowly? The standard, of course, for Republicans is always, did you avoid the appearance of impropriety? A higher standard than, I follow the regulations or I follow the rules. And in the case of this Inspector General's report, it's one of these things where they labored mightily to put Comey in a place where on this one, Jim, we're not going to prosecute you. Right. When really you shouldn't, as FBI director, I mean, the amount of power that bozo had, and thank God Hillary Clinton did not win, because he probably still would be the FBI director. Yeah. But the amount of power that bozo had, the amount of things that went wrong, the arrogance that this guy displays today, even after the report comes out, just says to me that we don't have the regulation of the FBI in the correct place. The tools that the FBI has to go after criminals have gotten ever more powerful, and to go after people who shouldn't be prosecuted, like Jerry Corsi as an example, or even me, when they came to see me on the question of, was I the money behind Julian Assange? Like,
did they ask you that?
Yeah.
Oh my God, how stupid is the FBI?
It was just like, it was, yeah, right. Yeah,
and all the people who are like, hi, Charles, have you spoken to the FBI yet? It's like, hey, what the hell are you talking about?
And so we see in this whole thing, it was, Strzok and these other people, they're leaking to they're either leaking to the media or they're leaking with the media, yes, as Strzok was.
I think Comey was as well.
Yeah, and there's this just unholy relationship between the globalist media and the FBI, the CIA, the security services, absolutely, the big donors, the politicians, particularly the Democrats, but some of the crony Republicans as well. And I think I like Gohmert's approach. I mean, he's a former judge in Texas, a top justice, lawyer, and he's a law and order person.
He gets pissed off.
Yeah, well, as he should be. And I think the benefit of the bargain here, we give the FBI this enormous power to intrude on our lives and to make people feel nervous, and as criminals should, but to make all of us, law-abiding citizens included, feel very nervous. We can't have it be the case that the director and his close circle, his or her close circle of people at the top, are actually saying the laws are for the other people. We'll do what we want. We'll target enemies of our president. We'll try to rig an election in the U.S. and abroad. We'll do all this kind of stuff because we serve, as Comey writes in the title of his book, a higher loyalty. I mean, that's a tell of the way this idiot thinks. And I think for history to move along in the American experiment, to move along in a way that's beneficial to all of us, this precedent set by Comey and Obama and Brennan and others, and the Bush team as well, and the Clinton team, it needs to be exposed. Sunlight needs to disinfect it, and people need to go to prison after they have been given a chance to defend themselves in a court of law. But there really needs to be a reckoning here, and it's long overdue, and we're not in a place where you can say, well, that's just the way things work in the 21st century. Get used to it, get over it. That's just the way it works. The system is not going to work if we allow this precedent to stand. Now, Joe DeGenova, in the next link, how he is on the inside of so many different things. He seems like a nice enough guy. I met him once, talked to him occasionally. But here he knows that the next report is coming out, and others have been saying that its indictments will result in terms of this FISA court warrant process, where apparently the court was lied to many different times. I saw Jason Chaffetz on Fox and Friends this morning. Trump saw it too, and he tweeted out about it. Chaffetz said, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Roberts, has to do something about it. You can't let the FBI director and Rod Rosenstein and others sign warrants that are knowingly false before this court, which is the process in the FISA court does not allow the target of a warrant to argue the other side of no, there shouldn't be a warrant. So it's tipped. The scales of justice start out being tipped here. They were abused, it would seem. We're going to see that in this memo. There must be consequences, profound consequences.
We haven't heard too much from Rod Rosenstein. I haven't been able to exercise that Rod Rosenstein hot dog graphic, but today would be the perfect day. It's unclear if he's done.
Is the graphic disappear?
I have the graphic, but I'm saying it's unclear if Rod Rosenstein is actually done. Nothing seems to have happened to him at all.
Well, and he threw some shade the other day against Comey. He actually, maybe there's hope for him, and maybe he has. I don't know. We'll see. So we go back in to the slides.
Yeah.
That's all right. Now, Sidney Powell, you've met her, I've met her. She's a wonderful person. I would not want to be on the other side of a case with her. This is this conservative tree house, The Last Refuge, and the poster is called Sundance. It does fantastic work. Provides a link to the 19-page brief that Sidney dropped on Michael Flynn's behalf before Judge Emmett Sullivan. We will see what happens here. But finally, Flynn is being represented ably.
Yeah.
And you have the full PDF for the whole brief. Lawyers among us can read it carefully. I have not had an opportunity to read it carefully. But I think this will end up being newsworthy. It'll end up being something that you're going to want to know about. And with luck, Michael Flynn may well end up seeing his good name cleared, and maybe even his financial situation put back to normal.
Wow. So it looks like this joint status report has prompted Emmett Sullivan to schedule a conference for September 10th. Lots of legal rubber hitting the road on September 10th, Charles.
That's good stuff.
Yeah. Sua sponte means the court just decided to do it on their own accord.
Good. So this is a story, and Gateway Pundit picked up, that this female lawyer, her last name is, I think, Liu, L-I-U. Is it Jessica Liu or something? If you can scroll down the page a little bit. Yeah, Jessie Liu. There is this, Sidney's book, License to Lie, which is a fantastic book, explains that when the government is in a process against a defendant and the government becomes aware of exculpatory information, it absolutely has to share that with the defense.
That's the law.
That's ironclad. And when you fail to do that, as this lady has done more than once, you should not still have your law license, in my view, because the jury is inclined, when you hear a lawyer is going to swear or make a case before a jury, the average juror would say, well, I'll give the government the benefit of the doubt. There are strict rules. You get punished if you do. No, you don't. This Jessie Liu gets to just run riot over the multiple defendants, this Maria Butina case, other cases. She should not be practicing law. There needs to be a process where people like this can be brought to justice and expelled from the practice of law and
prosecuted
and sent away to prison.
Yeah,
to places where the other prisoners don't like crooked lawyers.
Right. I mean, this is basically, it reminds me of that cop who was in the jail cell with Epstein when he supposedly hung himself. I mean, not so much for being in jail, but when you have a police officer who breaks the law, and to such a horrendous degree, drug dealing, murder, that is way worse than a regular person, because this officer of the law, this officer of the court, has been entrusted to uphold the public trust and justice, and she's corrupt. It should be like triple the punishment for a regular person.
Right, and people say, maybe that should be a working title for a section of the book. People say that Trump was guilty of obstructing justice. No, he was guilty of obstructing injustice. Yeah. And that's what we have to do. If the government's the government's perpetrating injustice, we the people have to do our level best, lawfully and peaceably, to obstruct injustice. And that's what this is all about.
Yeah.
So comes this, I don't know if you saw this story, I know you're very busy on the weekends, but here's a story about that DARPA, the research of.
I think I did see this.
They're going to fight fake news?
Oh, yes, I saw that.
I mean, this is in Bloomberg. I mean, if you're going to fight fake news, what will happen to the mainstream media? They have to shut the whole thing down. There'll be nothing left.
Well, it almost seems like these guys are getting a lot of letters from a certain ex-Air Force officer who is on a maniacal tear. But it seems to be talking mostly, I did read this. What do you want to tell us about this?
Well, I just think the notion of the military getting involved in any way in thinking through what is real and what is fake news. I would understand a regulator getting involved, but I do not understand the U.S. military, which has a well-known penchant for feeding fake news into the bloodstream around the world. I don't see this as being something that we should let happen.
Well, okay, so now I remember reading this. The thing that this conflated was the concept of deep fakes with this idea of fake news. They want everyone to believe that you're not going to be able to tell what's real or fake. You need us. You need our experts to tell you. So it's important that people dissect this and understand that a deep fake is something we've been talking about, where they take imagery of Arnold Schwarzenegger and apply that to Bill Hader, while Bill Hader is doing an Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonation. So you're given this sort of very subtle, strange, impression that you're looking at Schwarzenegger. So deep fakes use artificial intelligence to make it appear on video or in an image that somebody is saying something that they actually haven't said. And this is a problem. Somebody created a website where you could sort of program Jordan Peterson to say anything. And this is going to be something for courts to look at in terms of the federal rules of evidence. There are going to be more qualifiers for how photo and video evidence can be used, but it conflates it also with the notion of fake news. It was Jordan Peele, not Jordan Peterson. I don't remember who it was, but the idea is you can make fake imagery. Fake news is just a fake story. I was talking about this last week with Ghislaine Maxwell at the hamburger restaurant. There seems to be a lot of fake information surrounding that story, but no indication that artificial intelligence was utilized. It's a complicated topic, Charles.
Yeah, but it's not like I'm comfortable. I mean, I think people in our military do great work. They should be focused on externally, on making sure they understand what our external enemies are and readying scenarios to defeat those external enemies before they even strike us. I mean, that I understand. But to have the military get involved thinking through what's real and what's fake news, I've got some major problems with that.
Well, we also know that they're criminalizing journalism by sticking Julian Assange in jail. So this is a pretty scary topic for people.
So meanwhile, over in China, we're going to go quickly through these last few points, but in China, it's really looking rather ugly. I mean, I haven't checked in the last hour or so, and now it's just waking up, I think, in China Monday morning. It's really reached a situation over there, which I believe is spontaneous. I don't think the U.S. provoked this, where the Chinese, by overreaching and saying that they're going to change the rules and they would have the right to extradite anybody in Hong Kong, anybody who traverses Hong Kong into the mainland, I think that was a boneheaded move. Largely, and I said this on multiple different television channels, largely because you can't put that genie back in the bottle. You did it already. You've done this, which means that you're prepared to do it. And even if you say you're not going to do it anymore, only an idiot would say, well, they're not going to do it anymore. They did it, right?
They can't wait to do it again.
And they'll do it again. And so I think this is an unforced error on their part in tennis terms. We've got the U.S. Open going on here. This is China basically forfeiting maybe even a whole set here, a 2 out of 3 set match. Because when you look at this and you see this type of a mistake, and layer on top of it the situation in China with their extended finances, news that they've put a lot more helicopter money into the economy, trillions and trillions of the equivalent of quantitative easing into the Chinese economy, too much debt, too much malinvestment. You look at all this, people complain for good reason when an economy goes out of kilter, and it's not like this team of communists has a tremendous amount of experience in free market capitalism. It's that they don't. I mean, they started this experiment in 1989. They seem over there, when you screw up, they kill you. There's no 28-year wait to find out if you're going to be put on the chopping block. Or they decide that you were you committed a bribe or you screwed a business up, you go directly to the firing squad over there.
Yeah, they put you in that bodies exhibit.
Exactly, right. So I think we should watch this carefully, and people forget that in China, I think by last reckoning, it's only 150 million Chinese are directly affiliated to the Communist Party. There's another 1.2 billion Chinese people, and many of them are in the countryside where they're not yet in a modern economy. But this is not as stable a situation as may appear. And I think Trump is absolutely right, and it's a credit. I can't stand Chuck Schumer, but a credit to him. So far, he's still standing with Trump.
Schumer.
We've had, I've also had the pleasure in recent years, I suppose now, of going on this Iranian press TV channel to debate pro-Iranian, pro-Hezbollah people. And I have been warning them for some time that you don't want to provoke the Israelis and Trump at this point. You just don't. Hezbollah is not going to defeat Israel and the United States together. It's not going to happen. And Iran is not going to get very far under this president and if Trump is reelected with incessantly provoking or inciting terror in Lebanon, around the world, sending people to South America, Hezbollah people. There are rumors, unconfirmed rumors, that they were trying to infiltrate or get money to Hezbollah routed through the Clinton Foundation of all things.
What?
Yeah. And this idea that you can you can aspire to have a seat at the big boy table of nations in Iran because you have an ancient civilization, but be the prime sponsor of international terror in volatile places like Lebanon is a non-starter of an idea.
I thought that Saudi Arabia was the prime sponsor of terrorism.
I don't know. I mean,
I think seem to change depending on where the conversation is happening.
Well, but Iran is certainly, they're certainly involved around the world in many, or financing many diabolically bad terrorist operations.
And I don't know if you remember, but when I went and met with the father and, the parents of Michael Strange, the Army, I think he was a cryptographer who was killed in the destruction of Extortion 17. Michael's father, Charlie, told us that it had been released and publicly known that Iran was creating the triggers for these IEDs that are used in Iraq.
Right. Well, yeah. And so, in the lighthearted department, I saw this story. I could not believe it. That the idea, the idea first of all of using a sex robot at all, it's not high on the list of things I would want to do. But then now we learn that, and I'm amazed. I shared this, but it says there's 0 shares. That the coding errors in these robots can make them actually strangle a person. So I mean, like, why would you go down a track of saying, yeah, this is a good idea, rather than having a relationship with a human being? I want to now get close to a sex robot.
Get strangled by a rubber woman.
Right.
It's so stupid.
I mean, it's just utter lunacy. And then you sit there and you have all these people wringing their hands about climate change and the world's going to end, the economy is a disaster.
Robots are the problem.
If you were really, really poor as a global civilization, would there be a market for sex robots? I don't think so. I mean, we're just a little bit too affluent.
Is it like sexist, racist, robotist for me to say this robot isn't even good looking? This is such a bizarre topic. There was a lot of reporting that marrying robots became legal in Japan.
Right.
So, I mean, put this into the category of what could possibly go wrong.
Well, and then we continue this train of thinking. Again, this is a lighthearted show. We go to the next link. Only in France would you see this. The technological revolution is coming home in France. They're now opening a strip club. Right. Where the strippers are robots.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know who this appeals to. At least the strangulation robots are attempting to look like humans. This is maybe going to turn on surveillance cameras or cars, but like, who's going to this robot strip club?
I mean, this is kind of like the category of ideas that AOC has come up with. The world's going to end in 11 and a half years, and I think we should, it's demeaning to have women strippers will replace robots.
What's the carbon footprint of a robot stripper? And also, where do you stick the dollar? There's no.
I don't know. It probably only takes coins.
There you go. Coin op.
This is just. I mean, ridiculous. People will marvel over time. Humans, flourished on Earth from this, and look at the wacky things they did. Yeah. Anyway, I was sent this by Jerry Corsi, who has noticed that this, I'm not sure what Capital Research Center is, but the gentleman mentioned in here, if anybody actually knows the author, there's a guy who's been commissioned, his name is Martin Morse Worcester, who is, it says this summer, which is almost over, I don't know if he means next year, 2020, or this summer, a book called By Hook or By Crook, The Shady Past and Disturbing Future of the Clinton Foundation will come out. This person has not contacted me, which is somewhat surprising, but I contacted him, and I'm happy to take a look at what he's done before he publishes it. But this is interesting that this guy is a credentialed person. I think he might have a PhD, and has a long and distinguished career in academia and in philanthropy.
He looks even more pissed off than Louis Gohmert. I like this guy.
Yeah. So we'll have to see how thorough his work is. We'll have to see whether I hope it's heavily footnoted and sourced, and who knows, he might have come up with something that I don't know. So that's good. So, but before we continue on past this slide, I would insert a note of caution to anyone who has contact with an accounting firm or a law firm that might be trying to do work for the Clinton Foundation, or for donors to the Clinton Foundation, or for executives, trustees of the Clinton Foundation and its affiliates. It is an extremely risky thing, in my view, to at this stage, with November 15th, 2019, or November 15th, 2020 coming up, to think that you're going to get away with continuing to keep false and materially misleading financial statements and other disclosures in the public domain, as Bill and Hillary and Chelsea wouldn'tly try to get more money to feather their own nests, and that nobody's going to do anything about it. That's a very big mistake. On the other hand, if you are on the inside of one of these places, take BKD or some of these other firms that have done work in the past, and you've been studying, for whatever reason, the history, and you do see that wrongs happened, I suspect that olive branches will open up for the first people who come forward and say, we assumed Hillary was going to win. You know what happens to people on the other side, and she didn't win, and now it looks like Trump could win. And here you see these pictures of Bill. I don't know if you've gotten into this yet, Jason.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Well, people might have noticed, Charles, that I've replaced the image there. We got a copy. It's a little far off. Let me bring up so people can see what that is.
And that's because Halloween's coming and you want to scare the children?
No, you know what? Kevin Shipp did a really good investigation of this image on the intelligence assessment with Kevin Shipp, which people can watch on Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern. But the image that I've got up there is this, Parsing Bill. The controversial image that shows Bill Clinton apparently with 6 fingers, wearing this dress that Hillary wore to the Kennedy Center. Most of the online versions of this seem to crop out an image that Kevin brought our attention to. Yeah, almost all of them crop it out. There's an image of JFK on the bookshelf behind Clinton, and Kevin has suggested that there are hidden messages in that image, so it's going to sit above me until a more interesting image presents itself, which could be past my lifetime.
Good. So we've got just 4 more slides, and we'll try to keep it quick. I'm surprised, Jason, you haven't asked me about this button.
What's up with the button, Charles?
What button?
Exactly. I don't know if people can see the button from there. It says, what does it say?
I can't read it.
It says, Trump making Russia great again. That is a controversial button, Charles.
And we will debunk the button in a moment.
Nice.
So what I would like to say I see in the future here is there's sort of 2 broad categories of Clinton Foundation frauds. There's the pre-Obama period. He was in the Senate eventually, and he was a candidate, But this is the period where the Clintons were just doing their level best to cover up the gigantic expanding frauds that are the Clinton Foundation. And we could go back to 1997, even before that, but for this slide we just said, let's look at 2001 to 2007, the vaunted post-presidency of Bill Clinton. And let's just examine the different tentacles. Was there an FBI DOJ investigation of the Clinton Foundation? Yeah, from 2001 to 2005 there was, and we provided you the links to it. Mueller and Comey and Rosenstein were all involved one way or another in that, and they couldn't see obvious frauds. Why were they so obvious? Because 2001 to 2004, there were 4, in quotes, audits issued by BKD. In the case of the 2001 audit, I don't believe BKD was licensed under the name BKD to issue an audit by 2002 and for the audit for 2001, but they nonetheless did. And you're required under Arkansas law, under New York law, California law, other laws, you're required to issue an audit in conformity with what are called generally accepted accounting principles or standards. And it flatly says in the first 4 non-audits that these non-audits are issued not in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles.
They wrote that themselves.
Yeah, in their own text.
It's sort of
so,
stupid.
You would think, maybe Comey didn't know how to read back then, or Rosenstein didn't know how to read, Mueller didn't bother to read. But all you need to do is check the law. You've got to have an audit. Here's the thing that BKD puts together. It says, nope, not an audit. Open and shut.
I don't know if it's reasonable to expect the FBI to actually check anything or look at evidence.
No, I think the good people in the FBI would have done that. And then you were absolutely required, actually, under Arkansas law, to figure out whether you need to do an audit. You got to figure out what your revenues are, excluding government grants. And then the IRS says, in the 990 forms, which are the annual returns, you've got to list out government. You've got to aggregate government grants. Schedule B, you've got to list the big ones out, and to New York State and California, you've got to list details. So they claim there were no government grants. This is a bold-faced lie for the period 2001 to 2007. We don't know how much they may have been in 2001. It's possible there were none, but we do know that in 2002 to 2007, absolutely there were government grants in every one of those years. So they lied on their 990s. They failed to explain and draw the connections between the Clinton family and the monies they got in their crooked speech and other business dealings while Bill was pretending that he ran the Clinton Foundation, even though he wasn't an officer or trustee, and lawfully didn't really have the bright line link that he needed to use foundation resources for any purpose. He wasn't registered as an officer or a director or trustee. So in this period, we have every right to know as American taxpayers how much in the way of private gain Bill may have gotten. That's to say, off-market book deals, off-market speeches, unfair slices of investment deals with people like Ron Burkle and elsewhere. How much money did the Clinton family get in this time frame from people who were directly and indirectly donors to the Clinton Foundation? That's an exercise that, of course, BK didn't do. They don't believe in doing, apparently, the team on it, then doing proper accounting. And then, to what degree was the Clinton Foundation used for Hillary and for Bill and for Democrats as a good news broadcaster to try to pump up the political standing of Bill and Hillary and Chelsea and Democrats, and indeed to host fundraising events at the Little Rock Center and elsewhere? To what extent were the partisan activities of the Clintons mixed into the Clinton Foundation? And that's illegal. You didn't have an audit in this period, 2001 to 2004, so of course you couldn't figure this stuff out. But why didn't Rosenstein and Comey and Mueller dive into that area? And if they did dive into that area, why didn't they reach a conclusion that the Clinton Foundation and Bill and Hillary should have been prosecuted for public corruption, as the investigation targeted when it was opened in February of 2001? So there's a file here, and maybe it'll be like all the other Clinton files, that when people get to it, get past Wray, and look at what is in the library of the FBI on this Clinton Foundation, maybe you're going to see that they just decided to give the Clintons a pass, maybe because there was dirt around the Bushes and Enron or other places, and they just said, well, we're going to do a deal here. We'll let the Clintons off, we'll let the Bushes off, we'll just keep rolling along, and we in the FBI and the Department of Justice will have markers down against the full spectrum of American political senior types. So I would understand perhaps why people in Washington, D.C. would try to sweep this mess under the rug. But I don't understand in Arkansas, unless it is so rotten to the core, that Arkansas state government people would say, you know what, this type of stuff is fine. You know, we'll put some of the presidential papers here in Little Rock. We'll let Bill destroy the legal status of the Clinton Foundation by engaging in unauthorized activities around the world with money that was not raised for international activities, but raised to take care of an archive. We'll let all that happen because fundamentally our business model in Arkansas is to be the crookedest state in the union. You know, we like crooks, we like dirty money, we like laundering money. Bring us your crooks. I mean, if that's the idea, I mean, I get it. But
didn't one of the Stevens brothers die within the past couple of weeks? I was looking for the obituary, and it's like
Koch brothers.
Koch brothers. I thought one of the Stevens died as well.
I didn't see that, but the Koch brothers, one of the Koch brothers died. But so and then accountants this certified public accountants are supposed to take the interest of the public to heart. They're not sitting there doing their work to protect fraudsters. I mean, they're actually supposed to be, when they see fraud, they're supposed to tell the authorities and say, hey, this looks like a fraud to me, I'm resigning the account. So when are the good folks in Arkansas going to look at this mess and say, wait a minute, we can't, the Clinton Foundation knew that this was a fraud for 2001 through 4. They hid on their website and currently hide on their website these audits, which if they were up on the website, even, dopey James Comey would have to look at it and say, this is not an audit for 2001, 2, 3, and 4. I see the statute in New York, Arkansas, and California that says there has to be an audit. This is a fraud. Even dopey James Comey, once he got off his high horse, or even on his high horse, would see this was a fraud. So when is the accounting profession in Arkansas going to say, hold these BKD people to account and hold the other accounting firms that have come in here resting their work on the back of this crooked mess that BKD has slid into the public domain for so many years? When are the accountants in New York, in Washington, D.C., California, and elsewhere across this country, they're going to say, no, this is just rubbish. This is not an audit. This is
Iron Slippers says Bill and his brother are the Koch brothers.
That's right.
That's very good.
That's very good. Yeah. And then, as far as these government grants are concerned, I mean, we all are in a position, we have to pay taxes. Even if you're poor, you're paying taxes on your purchases, everything that you buy. One way or another, the component of the cost of any good or service is tax. And so when you think about it and you really drill down to how much we pay by way of taxes, all manner of taxes in this great country, we pay trillions of dollars every year in taxes. To think that our own government would then turn around and give the money that we could use for health care, for education, just for a decent meal or savings or whatever, that they're turning around just burning this money to crooked schemes around the world that where portions of the money that the government grants are sent to, large portions of that money goes right back into the hands often of American and foreign politicians to lead their champagne private jet lifestyles in presidential palaces around the world. When are people going to say enough of this? We don't need to send 15 billion, 40 billion to some slush fund in Geneva, yet another slush fund in Geneva called the Global Fund, that in theory is going to fight HIV/AIDS, but in practice nobody really knows what happened to the money. And some estimate that as much of 2/3 of all that money, 3/4, went to graft. That's 30 billion out of 40 billion. I mean, why are we allowing this to happen? Because we're allowing it to happen across the political spectrum. We're saying, yeah, it's okay. We'll fall for the argument that Trump's doing it, he's bad. The reality is, Democrats are doing it, Republicans are doing it, independents are doing it, and we don't have the money for this anymore. We've run out of other people's money in this country.
Yeah.
So This is a set of issues. There is no statute of limitations, I'm told, on this mess because they did not file their initial tax return, and for other reasons. This is an ongoing conspiracy, in my view. This is a RICO case. This is it involves people in and around the Clinton Foundation. It involves people in and around various governments around the world. So there's ample scope to go after this. There's actual scope to get money back, particularly governments that have given money to this fraud should be able, I think, to get their money back, possibly with triple damages.
Ooh.
You're talking about large amounts of money. There are deep pockets involved here.
I have a feeling they might check into that jail cell with Tartaglione if that happens. Like, whoops, he's dead.
And then if we just go to the next page, in order for us to know the whole story, and indeed this is what I'm working on for the book, you have to answer a whole bunch of questions here. We're not going to be able to say in the end it was some deputy assistant controller in the Clinton Health Access Initiative who's now going to go to prison for 38 years.
Somebody in the Tiger Department.
Yeah, because she missed it, and Bill thought there really was climate change, and it was convinced Ranbaxy drugs were excellent. He read reports on it. No, this is when we really run the traps on this. When we do it fairly, we're going to discover that Hillary Clinton and her people had an inkling she was going to lose badly by January of 2008, in my view. And certainly by June, when she smoked the peace pipe with Barack Obama before the Bilderberg meeting in Chantilly, Virginia, early in June 2008, they had a plan. They knew that McCain was not going to win. They needed to get set up to deal with the calamities that they fully expected to happen, and did happen with the financial markets. And there's going to be a record here, well beyond what we've seen so far, of how the teams got together and conspired. Again, the overreach that you see going after Michael Cohen, going after Manafort, et cetera, don't tell me that nobody in the FBI looked at this and said, bullshit, we're not going to start with the January 2009 emails. We want the emails on the Clinton Foundation going back to the beginning of time. And we want anybody who's going to try to get any kind of deal out of us on this investigation is going to have to sign a document that says, if you failed to disclose every single one of your email address, social media accounts, or whatever that you may have used, and failed to explain any technique you may have used to communicate with regard to Clinton Foundation or State Department, or however you want to define the matter, your agreement will be null and void, and we'll throw you into the hoos cow for a long time. They didn't do any of that. They just said, we'll just start. We ignore this pesky little period when they may have started the conspiracy. We're not going to look at that,
Well, but this is the bigger point, Charles, is that it seems that the FBI, I mean, it not only seems this way, we've got a lot of evidence that they're selectively prosecuting things, totally ignoring investigations, investigating other people. You've mentioned them, Corsi, Stone, Manafort. Meanwhile, Epstein's got properties all over the place, people cleaning them up, breaking stuff.
Epstein gets a slap on the wrist, and he's got massage. He's got girls coming to him in his work release program. It's a work and the wrong kind of release program. It's ridiculous. And so then the other thing is, on this issue, here you've got, we've got the military is now going to decide what fake news is. Right? On the other hand, we're going to let Hillary Clinton, not exactly a paragon of virtue in January of 2009, not as if there weren't a whole bunch of questions raised about her in the past. We're going to say, yeah, it's a great idea for you with your husband's foundation to go around the world and have this slush fund over here in the Clinton Foundation, at the same time that you're going to have access to all of our most sensitive information, and rather than protect that traffic, those records, they need to be protected on a government system, you could send them through your toilet bowl. That's fine. And you can use unvetted devices, and then once you leave in February 2013, February 1st, with your eyes fixed on the prize of the White House and a need to raise a lot of money, you can keep all that information, that saleable information, valuable information, wherever you want. And when time comes reluctantly to separate the government stuff from the personal stuff, we're not going to have a neutral monitor do that. No, you can do it. You can have a notorious set of partisans, hacks, make the decision as to what is personal and what is government. That's okay with us.
they've done a remarkably good job of convincing people that this Hillary Clinton email scandal was not that big a deal and she was just doing it for convenience. Nobody talks about that at all, except for us,
right.
At all.
Well, but that's got to change, and I think it will change. The other thing is, in this era, I was told by someone, I won't mention his name, but a reliable person, that years ago, the IRS had a system with regards to charities where they could cross-check and they could say, all right, what did Ortel say he gave to Yale last year, and what did Yale claim it got from Ortel? So you can check, and where there are anomalies, you know, when Ortel said I gave Yale 100 million and Yale said I got 100,000, there's people look at that and say, oh, wait a minute, this guy's obviously
99 million go.
Yeah, well, no, he's lowered his. You put a fake deduction in, and you lower your tax bill enormously, which is, I think, at the heart of these charity frauds. The first step, as we said before, is you don't tell the IRS how much money you actually raised. You skive off as much as you can. But when you have to admit what you got, the next step is you put in false invoices. You say you gave grants to a charity that is a friendly charity and will say, yeah, I got the money, when in fact they didn't get the money, and they're not really doing anything, so it doesn't matter. You know, they can say they had incoming revenue of 100 million from Ortel, and then they can just, you know, write a big fancy report for $100,000 showing plaintive eyes of a skinny African girl with a, you know, bowl on top of her head filled with water, and say that, yeah, we put a water treatment system into Nigeria, when really all you did, you wrote a report. Nobody's going to check.
Right.
You know, and so I'm just amazed that the IRS isn't all over that, particularly given, you know, you're not, in the business world, it's for profit, it's hotly contested, you're fighting for every last bit of incremental revenue and profit. In the charity world, the root of it is somebody said, you know what, I don't need this money anymore. Here you go, you can have my money. You would have thought that the IRS would say, that's a good place to start and check. This is money that the donor basically, fundamentally didn't need. You know, gave to a charity thinking they do good work. So they're not going to be terribly upset, the donor won't be, with the IRS going to the charity and saying, you know what, you ripped off the donor, right? You took that donor's money and instead you're paying lifestyle and you're writing these fancy reports, you're stealing money. There should be, across the political spectrum, support for reforming the charity regulation of charities. Now, Epstein, there's a lot of work going on. I'm not going to say who it is, but there's a lot of work going on by credible people who know what to look for, trying to think through just how actively involved Epstein was when with the Clinton Foundation. We know for certain he was active by September 2002. That we know. This is precisely a period where there was no international authority to do anything. Epstein his lawyers take credit in a letter in July 2007 for having concocted these international ideas like the HIV/AIDS initiative, the global initiative, but just exactly what was Epstein doing? We need to have people go back over his information, really to before 1997, but with regard to the Clinton Foundation, how many fundraisers were held by Ghislaine Maxwell, in theory with Epstein money, for what purposes, when, at what stage was the Clinton Foundation, how many commitments to action, you know, did Epstein and his cronies get involved with? What about all Epstein's...
What kind of action?
Yeah, exactly. What kind of, how did Epstein make his money? What are the connections to between and among Epstein and Maxwell and Wexner and others? What is his real background? You know, why did he, we've been through some of these issues, but what is his true life story? What was he doing after his second year of college when he supposedly dropped out? What did he tell Dalton to in theory, get a job at Dalton? The same question for Bear Stearns. Why was he bounced out of Bear Stearns? Who was really giving him any money and why? There are a lot of big questions that need to be answered here, and if they're not answered satisfactorily, we'll know this is just one big cover-up.
You know, this Whitney Webb interview that I was watching, she referred to, I think, a Daily Beast article where they actually interviewed the guy who replaced Donald Barr at Dalton and said that, no, the hiring happens before, and it seems like Donald Barr at least had something to do with bringing in
Well,
Epstein.
we need to know that.
I agree.
And then, you know, with regard to to these high-tax states. Here in New York, it's falling apart. I mean, it literally is becoming debumio. Mayor debumio. It's everywhere where you look.
Star bums.
Everywhere you look, businesses are leaving. Bums are everywhere. People. I mean, literally, I was walking around. I live in a nice part of town, and I was Saturday morning, or when was it? Saturday afternoon, Friday afternoon. I forget when. I was walking around the corner in a really nice spot, and next thing I know, somebody power booted. Not wearing a shirt, just like boot everywhere, throwing up everywhere. And people just say, it's nothing. I mean, the guy was obviously very sick.
Yeah.
And we have facilities in New York, good facilities, to help people who are mentally ill and have these type of problems. And instead, it's just like they're kicking them out into the street, encouraging this crazy behavior, raising taxes, coming up with ridiculous regulations, and sanctuary city here in New York and in California and elsewhere. Soon, we're under the cover of declining interest rates, this can all work. It can seem like it's working because it's not as, when you need to borrow money to cover off a deficit, it's not as expensive as if interest rates were up at like 8, 9, 10%. But the high tax states, New York, California, Illinois, and others, these are the states where the idea of a fake charity, where a bunch of crooked goons get together and manufacture these reports of high-sounding globalist causes, and lots of money comes their way, it costs the state and city treasury a tremendous amount of money, not to mention the bad name that it gives charities and the bad name it gives the many good charities that want to operate internationally. When is the FBI going to start investigating the Attorney General of New York for, on the one hand, targeting Trump and the district attorney, targeting Trump for his charity and ignoring the Clinton Foundation frauds? Same question for Xavier Becerra out there in California. These are states that are basically close to bankrupt, properly accounted for. If you looked at the contingent liabilities of New York State and California for pensions, for environmental cleanup, and then ran a scenario where half of each state said, sayonara, we're leaving. You could argue that New York City and New York State, again, are both bankrupt right now. And yet we're letting these tax cheats, these fraudsters, these Clintons and others, and in Illinois, the Obamas, concoct these schemes. They're really self-enrichment, virtue signaling schemes that should not be tax subsidized. When is the FBI or somebody going to get serious about this? So, with all that being said, it's not like Donald Trump needs to care what I think, but I think I'm just one person, you're one person, and our viewership now is quite a few people who care about this. So we want to see the swamp dealt with. We want to see charities regulated fairly. We want to see cronyism minimized, corruption reduced, and we want to see good and fair governance. And Donald Trump has had a lot of time. It's a big job, big transition, even for him to go from being a celebrity and a real estate developer to being leader of the free world. He's learning on the job. He's doing, I think, a good job. But if he wants to win in 2020, which he may not, but if he does want to win, he's got to show that he's draining the swamp. And to do that, you can't settle for, we'll just put Terry McAuliffe in jail and let Bill and Hillary and Chelsea skate. You can't do that.
No.
Right?
And have they even spoken about that? Terry McAuliffe would be a good guy to put in jail.
I'd call that a start.
I didn't make this one, Charles, but I noticed someone had created an image reminiscent of George Washington with Trump navigating the swamp. He's not draining it, he's floating in it with all these other swamp monsters. He's got to maybe drain the boat, get a new boat, and then drain the swamp, but he's running out of time. Joking aside, I think a lot of Crowdsource the Truth viewers, and myself included, Michael Moore has spoken about it quite a lot, Trump is running out of time. He's got to act. And as a matter of fact, after Monday, when everybody's back to school and back to work and all that sort of stuff, would be an excellent time to begin.
Right. Back to school and back to fool in the case of the Democrats.
Back to swamp training.
Yeah. Now, so I'm wearing this button, or I'm told I'm wearing a button. I can't read it. And that's because I have a confession to make.
What's that?
That, I've done a lot of work, and people have criticized me, actually, for appearing in Sputnik a lot. I've done over 100 articles in Sputnik, lots of appearances on Russian media and RT. And that's because there's a secret plan.
What's
that is
that?
now going to be revealed for the balance of Trump's 2 terms. He has got the perfect idea here to quickly drain the swamp, change the whole landscape. It's the next slide, page 9.
Oh, but I was, okay, sorry.
So this is the plan they've been working on in secret, and I've been asked to reveal it to everybody here so that the talking heads can go crazy. The federal government, as it turns out, owns 42% of the landmass of California, Oregon, and Washington. Now, each of those states are states that have a connection to Russia. Portions of each of these states, in fact, were they're Russian, obviously before the Soviet Union, claims on these lands, colonies were placed in each. So Trump's plan, which I'm empowered to now tell everybody about, is to give these states back to Russia. And in one fell swoop, we've done the math here to explain the power of this. Instantly, Trump wins re-election, because when you look at, he wins re-election, he gets the House back, increases his share of the Senate, and is guaranteed 66% of the Electoral College just using the same voter turnout as happened in 2016. So you go state by state. I haven't shown all the math here, but when you give these states back to Russia, or give them to Russia, then you lose 57 Democratic House members, and you only lose 11 Republicans. So the balance shifts. It's now 238 Democrat and Independent, 197 Republican. When you give these states back to the Russians, it becomes 181 Democrat, 186 in the House, so we control the House, Republicans do, and the percentage increase in the Senate, and again, using the same electoral vote count as last time, you see it goes from a narrow victory, the Wikipedia has it 304 to 227, but by giving these states back, it becomes 304 to 157. So it's a cakewalk. This is the secret masterstroke of Donald Trump, what he's really been working on all this time.
But the only problem is the Democrats are never going to go for this because they just found out that Russia's not communist anymore.
No, it's going to make them happy, right? The Democrats will love it. I mean, clearly, Russia's got to be more left-leaning than the United States of America.
Maybe.
Right? Now, in case people hadn't guessed, this is a complete joke that I remember. I'm sure it's not going to be, the FBI will knock on our door in 5 minutes and we'll have to answer questions. But this is obviously a spoof, but I just thought that people would be interested. And on the question of who is kicking Russia and Iranian butt hardest, this is information from my favorite site, UNCTAD, for financial data. This is actually a globalist operation that does do something of tangible value. It takes every single nation on Earth, going back to, I think it is 1970, year by year. It does many cuts at many different pieces of data, but here is information for between 2008 and 2017. How did the economy of the Russian Federation do? How about the Islamic Republic of Iran? How about the United States? And here we see the Russian Federation has had serious problems. I mean, in this one year here, 2008 to 2009, their consumption went down by 15% in a year. I mean, that's a big, we only went down in that period a tiny little percent.
Why did it go down so much?
Financial crisis, oil, everything. So, consumption in Russia is more or less the same as it was in 2017, 16, 17, as it was in 2008. Whereas in the United States, consumption, that's what most of us do. Most of us don't invest money. Very few people actually have money to invest. They're just living hand to mouth. So what we do is we consume. We buy goods, we buy services, and the measure of the health of a portion of the economy is, are we consuming more or less? The theory being, if you consume more, you're probably better off than if you consume less. So in this period where the Russian Federation's consumption was flat to down, and its investment was down, and the Islamic Republic is actually about half the size of Russia in terms of population, but it's way down in the gutter in terms of the amount of consumption, the amount of investment. These two economies are reeling. And these are this isn't like subjective analysis. This is how much are you spending per person, how much are people around the world deciding to invest inside your country, In contrast to the United States, we see consumption up, we see investment up, and on a per capita basis, we're roughly a little bit more than twice the size of Russia and 4 times the size of Islamic Republic of Iran.
Population, you mean.
Population-wise, but look at the difference in investment and consumption against each of these two countries. So to say that, I put this up here to say that it's not like Donald Trump, or for that matter, even Barack Obama, were trying to help either of these two countries out. It's not like either of these two countries are doing well in opposition to the United States. And in contrast, you know, if one or both of these countries said, you know what, we're sick of this endless fighting, Iran versus the US, this trying to outcompete. I mean, look, the Russian Federation's combined consumption and investment is 1.2 billion, roughly, both in 2008 and 2017, and ours is 13 trillion in 2008 and almost 17 trillion in 2017. Somebody's doing better than somebody else economically.
Any truth to these rumors, Charles, that they're thinking about bringing back tuberculosis to improve these consumption numbers?
Improve them?
Well, consumption is tuberculosis, isn't it?
Tuberculosis would not improve them.
Well, I was just, you know, a lot of people in the comments didn't seem to get that your previous slide was a total joke.
Right.
So I'm trying to throw some jokes at people to help them understand where we're going in this segment of the show.
Yeah, that was actually, I had seen that trick used when I was taking care of my kids in upstate New York, and I would spend a lot of time driving around all over upstate New York. That's when I first encountered talk radio and Hannity and Rush. And on April Fool's Day, I had forgotten it was April Fool's Day, Hannity got up there and he gave this long, impassioned admission speech where he said, you know, for years I've been saying negative things about the Clintons, and I just didn't appreciate their brilliance and their sacrifice, and I want to apologize to you, Bill, and went on and on and on and on. And he was believable. You know, and of course it was an April Fool's trick. So I thought I'd try to step into Sean Hannity's shoes. So I think a message that Trump is delivering to North Korea and others as we think about the state of play around the world is that most of the secrets and tools that can be used by a nation and by businesses to lift people up inside the nation state, many of them are known. They're out there in the public domain, courtesy of the internet. It's not like it's a big mystery that it's, you know, if you have in your country dirty water and no sanitation and no roads and no electricity and no doctors, that's probably not going to be a good move for your people. I mean, it's not that complicated.
It's a challenge for the economy to develop when everybody is sick.
Right. And so I think what the United States certainly has shown, even to our enemies over the course of our history, is that we, once we get through these bloody periods, as happened in World War II, we do lift other countries up, or do our best in the Marshall Plan in Europe, in Japan. I mean, we have been very generous over many, many decades around the world. We have.
But wouldn't a lot of people argue, Charles, that that was a way to kind of slip in the central banks and exert control over those countries for decades to come?
Interesting fact, in 1952, I happened to look at 51 or 52, the General Motors annual report, right? We had of the car market, we had something like 91% of the car market.
United States
in 1952. So, I mean, the position, when you go into the history of the United States, obviously you have to pick a place to start. And the New York Times would like us to start in 1619 to suit the narrative that we've always been a racist country, ignoring that people got to America in 1492 and what happened with the Spanish.
What about the racists working at the New York Times?
Exactly. But when you go back into economic history and you say, what, you know, as markets were becoming more developed around the world, what was the position of the United States? It advanced a lot by the 1870s, 1880s. We certainly were a rich country in 1920. We had that setback from 1933 to 1945, but I mean, the United States has had a developed economy for a long time. Doesn't mean it couldn't be improved, doesn't mean there weren't flaws in it and aren't flaws in it, but to say that it was all a ruse, the Marshall Plan, I mean, it was better to have strong trading partners than not, And it wasn't a ruse that we spent the amount of money that we spent. We spent a tremendous amount of money then and normalized to modern terms. And I think the message that Trump is not a geopolitical military genius. I mean, that's not his background. He's a developer.
I thought he was a stable genius.
Well, he's a business developer. He's a real estate and business developer and a deal maker, exactly. And he looks at a place like North Korea, for an example, which does have tremendous resources, as does Afghanistan, rare earth minerals and other minerals, small population, big expanses of land, and perhaps in more sophisticated ways than I might, he looks at this and says, this is brain damage. You know, we have in North Korea where you're focused on a path that you're just going to get squashed like a bug, either by us or by the Chinese eventually. You know, why don't you, when you turn on Google Earth at night in North Korea, you're not going to see much light because there's not much electricity in North Korea. You know, why don't you get with a program here? We'll help you out. We use this as a way to actually change the relationship among North Korea, China, and the U.S. For China's standpoint, do you really want to have a nutcase throwing these missiles up that could hit you, whether by design or on purpose at one point in time? You really want to have a maverick state like this on your border? It'd be like us having, the Bahamas have something like that, developing nuclear weapons in the Bahamas. I mean, we wouldn't want that.
Yeah. Could you imagine? It would be like a kite surfing rig. You'd like rent it for the afternoon or nuke somebody. It's your call.
In Jamaica, you put a lime in the coconut. So I think you're absolutely right, though, Jason. We've had a long, drawn-out summer here. There's been a lot going on around the world, but Monday, people should take time off to be with their families and enjoy the last few moments here of the summer break.
Yeah.
But I think come Tuesday, if not beforehand, a lot of markers have been laid down. A lot of expectations are there for Trump and his team to finally drain the swamp, bring these criminals to account. And of course, the criminals don't want to be brought to account. So there's going to be drama.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, when he first came on the scene, I was very skeptical of Mr. Barr based on his previous tenure as the Attorney General and the pardons related to Iran-Contra. I just don't think we can ignore the links to Jeffrey Epstein, various people in Israel, Saudi Arabia. He had that Saudi Arabian passport, ties to Adnan Khashoggi, the recent murder of Jamal Khashoggi. There's so much going on here that we don't know about, Charles. It's really, I have to say, at this moment, I've lost confidence in William Barr, because I just don't think, if he was so appalled 2 weeks ago, why has there been no raid in New Mexico at the Zorro Ranch or whatever that Epstein? Yeah. Why do they still allow people to be moving around? I mean, it seems like they spent an afternoon there and they were more concerned with stopping Rusty Shackelford from revealing things on that island than actually finding any evidence. So I think it's really interesting to see how independent journalism is blossoming in this toxic environment where it's become more and more clear every day since 2016 that the media, including social media, tech giants, are all involved in this massive social engineering campaign that's designed to fool everybody into thinking that liars are our saviors and our saviors are liars, or the truth is a lie is the truth, whatever it might be. So it's very troubling to witness all this and try and unravel it.
Well, I think we're going to know. The good news here, I mean, again, let's hope all people in political life, even those I don't particularly care for, are safe. I mean, I don't want to see anybody hurt.
No.
Physically hurt. And Donald Trump is the president of all of us here in the United States, so we should all hope for his safety. And I think there are serious risks to his safety posed by dread actors and internal people alike. That said, on the question of whether Barr's going to be honest or not, or whether this is going to be drained or not, we're going to know. We're going to know well before November.
But it'll be too late. I mean, Epstein's already dead.
Well, the Clinton Foundation's still around. The Gates still has a lot of money. It's far from over.
I'm not sure what I'll do if November 2020 rolls around and Bill Clinton is still being painted in dresses and hanging out, going to parties and things like that. But, you know, Charles, I think we've come to the end of the show, unless there's anything else you'd like to discuss. I want to thank everybody and the generous Patreon and Subscribe Star sponsors. As I said, it's really important that people get on there as sponsors. If you're not a sponsor, make sure you're subscribed to the Jason Goodman YouTube channel. You can also subscribe to Crowdsource the Truth too. A lot of people telling me they're getting unsubscribed, but please become a sponsor. Go over to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I'm working on some major upgrades to crowdsourcethetruth.com that may have disrupted my email today. I'm sort of looking into that, but there's going to be an all-new crowdsourcethetruth.com coming soon. There might be some intermittent trouble with crowdsourcethetruth.com or perhaps temporary pages and things like that, but looking forward to seeing more people over there. Thanks for another excellent presentation, Charles. I hope everybody has a great weekend, and I'll see everybody tomorrow.